Hey, how's it going, folks? It's Thomas here, otherwise known as Virtual Bacon. Some of you guys might recognize me as the artist for the Soul Shakers. For today, I will be the one behind the mic, going over the basic game mechanics and concepts for the best game in the world, SOULCALIBUR 6. This guide will cover everything to help get anyone that is interested in the series to not only learn the basics, but to help give them an understanding of why and when to do things. Hopefully after watching this, you guys can just watch a combo video of your favorite character and you should be good to go. Now with the intros out of the way, let's get into it. So, like many other fighters, SOULCALIBUR 6 displays the life bars for each player at the top of the screen. To my knowledge, it is about 250 hit points each for every character in the game. Looking under that, it is the round counters for each match, and towards the middle is the round timer, and you might notice your second bar. This bar is for your meter, and in this game it is commonly called your soul gauge. During fights, you can put up to 2 stocks of it before it caps out, and as you guys might have noticed in this particular match, the player's life bars have begun to flash. This is an indicator for your guard gauge, and I will go over this in more detail later on in this guide.
I hate defending.
Now, before anything else, it would be good to learn how to read commands for this game. Notations for SOULCALIBUR is written in the traditional number system. As you guys can see on the screen now, 6 is used for forward, 4 is for back, 8 is for up, and 2 is down. If you guys are on the 2-player side, then the forward and back directions are reversed. It's a fairly common system used for fighting games, but if you ever have trouble remembering, the easiest way is to just think of your number pad on your keyboard. Like many other great fighting games, moving around in SOULCALIBUR can be very expressive. The movement system itself is called 8-way run, where you can move around in any direction fluidly just by holding down the desired direction. Forward is the fastest, followed by side movement, with backwards clocking in at the slowest. You can change direction mid-animation, and it can also be cancelled with attacks and guarding. Moving right along, attacks are shown as A, B, and K. Horizontals, verticals, and kicks respectively. G is used for the guard button, and on screen now is a couple of examples of how the same move can be written in both the in-game notations and the numerical one mentioned previously. As you can see, double arrows or numbers means to input that direction twice. Anything that is colored black or in brackets means to hold or charge, and if you see a lowercase letter followed by an uppercase one, it means to do a slide or quick input. And lastly, underscores means you can do either or of the stated command. Now finally, with all the boring stuff out of the way, let's talk about the many fun ways that you can use to beat up your opponent. Before we dive into basic offense, knowing how your attacks interact with your opponent will be a good place to start. For attack types, there are high attacks, which can be avoided by crouching, middle attacks or mids that can hit crouching opponents, and low attacks that can be avoided by crouch guarding or jumping. On that note, there are also 2 more unique types that kind of bend these basic rules. These are called special lows and special mids. Special lows can be avoided like a normal low, but also be blocked while stand guarding. Usually a character's generic 2A, which we will go over in a little bit, is a special low. Special mids are few and far between, and not every character has one. Much like how special lows can be blocked both ways, Special mids can be blocked while crouching or stand guarding.
I shall never hand over Soul Edge.
When would you learn?
Horizontal attacks make up the backbone of any good offense in SOULCALIBUR, except for a few specific characters. Usually both the generic standing and crouching horizontals, 5A and 2A respectively, are a character's fastest attack, and a lot of them have excellent tracking properties. Showing on the screen now will be an example of their tracking properties. Taki on player 2's side will approach with an attack and then sidestep afterwards for a follow-up attack. Mitsurugi on player 1's side will respond immediately after guarding with a vertical attack for big damage. But as you can see, the vertical attack, as powerful as they are, completely misses Taki and Mitsurugi is launched into the air. So, if we back up to the beginning, Mitsurugi, after blocking, could have opted for the weaker but faster tracking horizontal. This would have stopped Taki's sidestep, thus preventing any further pressure. As you can already guess, due to their quick speed and tracking, 5As and 2As are great at keeping your opponent in check. However, as a trade-off, all generic 5As are high attacks, and most generic 2As, as mentioned previously, are special lows, meaning both can be avoided by crouch guarding. On top of that, 2As are also played with short attack range. Regardless, 5As and 2As are a good choice for chipping away at your opponent or restricting their movement, and as an added bonus, the first hit of a generic 5A string can be cancelled with the guard button. This cancel is an excellent tool to force a reaction out of your opponent without committing to an attack. As for the generic 2As, they are perfect for stealing back your turn, as they are fast, avoid highs, and give you advantage on hit, meaning you can follow up or begin your offense. Do keep in mind, while all horizontal attacks do have tracking properties, there are still a few that can be avoided by sidestepping in a certain direction. Standing vertical attacks, or 5Bs, when compared to standing horizontals, are a little bit slower, but they do more points of damage and can hit crouching opponents, as they are all classified as middle attacks. Verticals in general are powerful attacks, as most characters' launches is a B move. The majority of them will also crush your opponent's guard gauge if they are flashing red. And, much like generic 5As, the first hit of a generic 5B string can be cancelled with the guard button. Except for a few specific moves, almost every vertical attack can be avoided by sidestepping, as they are linear or have very limited tracking.
This is pointless.
But despite these weaknesses, vertical attacks are key to every character's offense, some definitely more than others. Just due to the nature of how most vertical attacks are mids, they cover the weaknesses of high and low attacks, thus helping to create the basic foundations for most mix-ups in SOULCALIBUR. Kicks, or sometimes referred to as the unarmed attack, is performed with the K button. A very general rule for SOULCALIBUR is if a character's 5A string is slow, then their 5K will be their fastest generic attack. K attacks are unique, as they are usually the in-between of both horizontal and vertical attacks. For example, some K attacks will track like a horizontal, and others will hit crouching opponents like a vertical. Just like A and B attacks, the generic 5K can also be cancelled with the guard button. While K attacks may share the beneficial properties of both horizontal and verticals, they do have their own weaknesses. Regarding the 5K, since the attack is unarmed, they often lack the attack range of a generic 5A or 5B. If an attack clash were to happen, usually weapon-based attacks will cancel each other out. But if a K attack clashes with a weapon one, then both players will still receive damage. Attack clashes will be discussed in more detail later on in this guide. All the attacks mentioned so far, while strong, can be stopped by one simple thing, the guard button. So, to help get around this, throws are a good way to help open your opponent's defenses. All generic throws are done with A+G or 4A+G and are classified as highs. Depending on which side you grab your opponent, front, side or back, you'll get a different throw animation. While throws cannot be guarded against, you can avoid them by crouching or jumping. If you do happen to get grabbed, do not worry, as there's still a chance for you to get out of them by performing a technique called a throw break. Throw breaks can be performed the moment you see the hit spark. The hit spark shows up as a red circle around the initiating character's hands. A+G throws are broken by inputting any attack button, while 4A+G throws are broken with the 4 direction with the attack button. Side throws are broken in the same way, with back turn throws being unbreakable. Unless you're one of these guys. Much like every other fighting game, knowing how to break throws is a very important skill. Throw damage in SOULCALIBUR is quite high, as generic throws can do 50 points of damage, with side and back throws doing even more. The high damage alone, and the fact that they can bypass the opponent's guard, makes them valuable tools when mixing up your offense. It is also worth noting that breaking throws will also reward you a meter for your soul gauge. That being said, there is no visible way to tell which generic throw is being used, but don't worry though, as the vast majority of them are quite reactable as they are all slow, and throws in general have very poor range. The window for breaking throws is also very lenient, and as of version 1.3, the camera now zooms in slightly whenever a throw connects. The zoom in effect acts as a visual indicator for when the break window is open. Later revisions of the game have added back in throw break damage to the series. This means the player that broke the throw will now receive a tiny amount of damage, but this damage will never result in a KO. Do be mindful though, as every character will have a throw that can cause a ring out if performed near the stage edge. There are some that can grab crouching or airborne opponents, and in the super rare cases, some are blessed with throws that have fire effects. This just means that the throws are unbreakable. On a side note to throws, some characters will have attacks that can transition into a throw under certain hit conditions. These are called attack throws, and unlike normal throws, attack throws cannot be broken with a throw break. But since they start from an attack, they can be blocked with the guard button. Another good tool to use against a guard heavy opponent are break attacks. Inputting A+B will perform your character's generic break move. These powerful attacks are all easily identified with the blue lightning effects. If you manage to land one, it will deal high amounts of damage and knock the opponent down. Also, as the name will suggest, even if the break attack gets blocked, it will deal a big chunk of damage to the opponent's guard gauge. But, as you can already guess, break attacks do have their sheer weaknesses. Almost all of them are slow, meaning you have plenty of time to react to the fancy light show. Besides a few specific characters, a majority of generic break attacks are linear verticals, so you can easily sidestep it. And even the generic horizontal ones are all high attacks, meaning you can crouch to avoid them. Outside of the generic A+B attacks, every character will have multiple guard break moves, usually in their soul charge state. Some characters will be lucky enough to have as part of their attack strings, or even as part of their Critcal Edge. Break attacks are fairly important, as they are one of the primary methods of dealing with defensive tools in this game, such as guard impacts and reversal edges. Even a blocked break attack can work into your advantage, as most generic A+B attacks leave you in a favourable position allowing you to follow up with pressure if you choose to do so. Another powerful attack similar to break attacks are unblockables. These attacks are all character specific, so there is no generic command for them, and as the name implies, they cannot be stopped by guarding or any other defensive techniques. Identified by the fire effects, most of them do an insane amount of damage or lead to a devastating combo. And unless stated otherwise in the character's move list, just like generic attacks, most unblockables can be cancelled with the guard button. Sounds overpowered, right? Well, much like break attacks, all of them are super slow. With such a long wind up time, your opponent can interrupt you before the attack even comes out. And if you were to miss, it leaves you wide open to an opponent's counterattack. As mentioned previously, some characters will have throws with these unblockable fire effects. This just means that those throws cannot be escaped with a throw break. Mentioned briefly in the very beginning of this guide are 8-way run attacks. These attacks are performed out of, 8-way run. 8-way run attacks can be performed with two methods. The first method is by inputting an attack after moving in one direction for a while, and the second is by double tapping the desired direction with the attack command. Just like unblockable attacks, every character will have their own set of 8-way run moves. With so many different variations, it is impossible to explain every single one in the scope of this guide. But to help give you a general idea of what purpose they serve, here are some very loose guidelines that they all follow. Forward 8-way attacks, or 6-6, are usually the go-to move for closing distance or chasing down an opponent. The sidestepping 8-way attacks, 2-2 or 8-8, are moves with good evasive properties and are excellent for when you have a good read on your opponent's linear attacks. And lastly, the backstepping 8-way attacks, 4-4, are usually designed for creating distance or has some kind of defensive property to them. Once again, I just want to reiterate that this is a very loose guideline for 8-way attacks. Every character is unique, so I encourage you to explore your chosen character's move list. If you ever see a character burst out with an aura of energy, this is called soul charging. As of Season 2, there are now two ways to enter soul charge state. The first method is done with 4 A plus B plus K, and it is usually used for more defensive purposes. Entering soul charge this way will trigger a big burst of energy, pushing your opponent back. The more offensive method is by performing an attack called the soul attack. This is done with 2, 3, 6, A plus B plus K. Regardless if the attack hits, misses, or gets blocked, your character will always enter the soul charge state. Do note that both methods will require at least one full bar of soul gauge to perform. When you enter the soul charge state, the round timer will freeze for the duration of your soul charge, and your soul gauge now turns into a timer bar draining towards the bottom. Once empty, your character will return back to their normal state. Every character's soul charge is unique, but there are a few global benefits, such as getting a damage boost across the board, with chip damage being added to most of your attacks. Some of your attack strings will now also be upgraded with new properties like being a break attack, or even have an additional follow-up. As mentioned previously, once the timer runs out, you will automatically revert back to your normal state, but also using soul charge specific attacks or getting hit while powered up will also drain your soul charge timer. A good way to use soul attacks is to injure combos with them. This allows you to use your powerful soul charge attacks to help keep the pressure going, while also forcing your opponent to be on defense. 4 A plus B plus K is usually the more defensive way, as the explosion will knock the opponent back or stop whatever action they were performing at the time. you will also be invincible to all forms of attacks during the duration of the explosion. This makes for A plus B plus K a good defensive option to help create breathing room from your opponent. Think of this more as a get off me or a reset neutral button. That being said, you can also activate it offensively as well. If activated on an airborne opponent, it will spike them to the ground. Or if you have positioned yourself just right, you can push them towards the ring or wall edge with the explosion. Do be mindful though, as on the off chance you do get hit before the soul charge flash happens, it will cancel your soul charge state and drain one full bar of your soul gauge. While this is really rare, there is always a chance it can happen, so it's important to keep that in mind. To round off the list, we have Critcal Edges. Requiring one full bar of soul gauge to perform, these high damage cinematic attacks are done by inputting A plus B plus K. Upon activation, it will freeze the round timer until the cinematic is finished. Every character will have their own unique Critcal Edge. Some have defensive properties, others are grabs, and some are excellent horizontals that track movement. But, like every other powerful move in SOULCALIBUR, Critcal Edges are balanced out with a few weaknesses. Many Critcal Edges can be avoided by either sidestepping or crouching, and the cinematic won't happen if the Critcal Edge misses or gets blocked. If this were to happen, it leaves you wide open to a nasty counterattack. Critcal Edges are also not invincible before the cinematic flash happens. If you do get hit before the cinematic starts, you will lose one bar of your soul gauge, and the Critcal Edge will be negated. Despite these shortcomings, landing a Critcal Edge can easily turn the tide of the match back into your favour. They make excellent tools for punishing missed attacks, and the high damage alone can sometimes even win you the round on the spot.
Can't stand. You're done for.
So, in summary, good usage of these different attacks will make your offense something to be feared. For example, is your opponent just sidestepping you a lot? Then you'll want to start using more horizontal attacks. Are they just stand guarding everything? Then maybe you'll want to start using more grabs and break attacks to help chip away at them. That being said, you also want to vary your attack patterns as well. Being too dependent on one type will start to make you very predictable in the match, but careful use of certain attacks can also help condition your opponent to react a certain way, allowing you to capitalize on the situation or getting that hard read on your opponent. Hey guys, thanks for watching. This was just one of the many segments in my full SOULCALIBUR tutorial that covers everything from the bare basics to learning how to play with confidence. If you're interested in the rest, I highly recommend you check them out on their YouTube channel. Until then, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.